In a similar sort of way, there have been times where, whether due to adverse weather or whatever, I would hike to a fall summit and for the moment allow that to be my summit, deciding that if it was important, I would return at a later time to go to an even higher fall summit, or maybe to the real summit that was the highest point of the mountain. So fall summits, they are what they are. We call them fall summits because they're not the highest point of the mountain, but it's not that they're not worthy goals. In the song I just shared with you, it's also a way of looking at that metaphor I got from a friend of mine who does a lot of quilting. How much you see depends upon how close you look. Whether you see the real summit of the mountain depends on how much of the mountain you've actually examined, how much of the mountain you've actually looked. When it comes to sailing on a boat, racing across the top of the water, and maybe your first experience with a boat was rowing a boat, and then someone introduced you to a sailboat, and you weren't doing anything except steering, and the boat was moving very fast, much faster than you could row. And maybe after that someone introduced you to a motorboat, which could go even faster yet. In each case, those experiences are like fall summits. It's a place that's not the most that can be done. It may be a stopping point. It's a mile marker along the way. It's a level you can reach, a point you can be at, but there's more beyond it. It's a worthy point to reach, and you may not want to go further. You may decide this is far enough. When it comes to boats, I'm quite content with paddling a canoe, actually. I don't really need to be in a fast motorboat. But that's a choice. I know there is something beyond that, however, but it's my choice. And there's no compelling reason to do otherwise. When I fly a kite, as a child, there was a certain competitive edge that was presented to me. How much string do you have on your kite? How much string do you have on yours? Well, if I have more string, that means my kite can go higher than yours. Not that that would necessarily prove anything, but there was a certain accomplishment, let's say, in flying a kite so high that you actually got to the point where you could hardly see it. And the only way you knew it was still there was because there was tension on that string, a lot of tension. And yet the interesting thing about all of these is there's also a certain concern about what can go wrong as you're pushing your limits. That when you go beyond a fall summit of a mountain, you know you're getting into higher and higher areas where there's less and less oxygen in the air. In flying a kite, I knew the further out I let the string go, the more pull there was, and the stronger the string had to be so that it didn't snap. Because if the kite got so far out that I could hardly see it and the string snapped, I might never be able to find it when it comes down, because I would have no idea where it landed. In a similar sort of way with a boat, the song only talks about sailing across the top of the water, seeing dolphins and whales and fascinating things on the surface. Maybe I've never been so fortunate, but maybe someone has been out on a boat in the ocean somewhere and seen a manta ray leap up out of the water and soar through the air for a little bit. They're quite an unusual and interesting creature. But these are all things on the surface. I don't feel the need, no offense intended, everybody else can enjoy it. I don't feel the need to strap on air tanks and go below the surface. There's something intimidating to me about being in a world so completely different where I am absolutely dependent upon that tank of oxygen. But growing up, I used to watch television specials about Jacques Cousteau all the time, and how he would strap on these air tanks and go to the bottom of the ocean with lights and special equipment and the fascinating things down there, creatures that were unlike anything I would have imagined, and wonders, and things that teach us about our limits, and yet about the abilities we can create. That that these divers created abilities to visit these unusual creatures, to photograph them, to study them, to learn about them, and thereby to become more complete persons in themselves. There's something about learning about all the different animals around the world, all the different environments, all the different languages. Somehow it gives me a bigger sense of self in which to live, and more possibilities. My dreams become bigger. Growing up, it was as if the world ended at the edge of town. Well, following the basic metaphor of my song, if I had started walking, I would find that when I got to the edge of town, there was still another valley in front of me, another piece of road. And as I kept walking, there'd be another piece of road. And ultimately, there would be a new horizon. There was one time I decided to visit a friend in another city, 50 miles away. I was 14 years old, and everyone thought riding 50 miles on a bicycle was just an impossible feat. And I decided one day that I would do it anyway. And I got on my bicycle and I started pedaling. And I pedaled for 6 hours. And I made it to my friend's house in a city 60 miles away. And it was a really interesting journey of self-discovery.